of today, I would say. Future-proof your content with Semantic AI and Tridion. All right, so you see there's a lot of presenters on this deck. We have a lot of people who are contributing, so I'll be passing on control quickly after this, but I'll start with a quick introduction and indeed a reminder that the session is being recorded. All right, so Semantic AI. I have a couple of slides that will give you kind of a brief introduction of background and the actual offering before we go and dive into the technical details. So I hope I can keep that relatively short for you, but do ask any questions along the way, obviously. All right, so yeah, basically this is a famous slide my colleague Joe usually actually presents about China Airlines, and where he's saying like, hey, if you want to if you want to make sure that you can actually find the information that you're looking for while you're browsing a site, you know, content needs to be related in a certain way, right? In this case, he was actually looking about what are the rules for children's, you know, being on board and those kind of things, because he's flying to Taiwan. Then, you know, it's fairly easy here on the site to actually find the information that you're looking for about boarding children and you know, what are the rules around that. But in this long flight, actually, you know, there was a perfect opportunity for him, actually for China Airlines as well, you know, to sell him a family couch option, which was something that that wasn't directly related to, you know, or at least advised on the site that he was looking at, on the page that he was looking at, but kind of like a missed opportunity because he only found out later. So this is just an illustration of how consumers actually struggle to meet their goals, right? They're trying to find this certain piece of information, and usually actually there's multiple pages, multiple pieces of content actually that are composing the answer to the question that the user is actually looking for. And yeah, the problem is that this content is usually stored in and delivered actually as disconnected bits. So and as you all know, just adding you know, hard links from one page to another or from one piece of content to another is manually is actually expensive, will be inaccurate quite soon, outdated and such things, and you know, will remain limited. So here, you know, there are also options like, can we use machine learning then to actually solve this problem? But unfortunately, unless you have a very specific, you know, problem that you want to solve, machine learning is not always as effective, right? And as a side effect, also, it's not very transparent of how you came to a certain outcome using machine learning. So I think this is where we're actually introducing a more future-proof way of doing this, which is to map content semantically. So what do we mean with that? We go to the next slide. Well, I mean, you kind of need to understand what a knowledge graph is for that, right? So a knowledge graph is basically a certain representation of the world with all kinds of concepts that the computer systems and programs can understand as well. But all these different concepts, they have relationships to each other, and we can map those relationships, as you can see here in this example as well on the screen. So by using this model, you know, not just humans, but also computers and programs can actually understand and process this information, and can, you know, understand these relationships between different things basically that you relate these concepts with. So this is where to find the button. And this is basically where also analysts are saying like, hey, this is actually important, an important way of going about AI, processing AI application. Sorry, applying AI in general, actually, than just the machine learning model that we've just talked about. So knowledge graphs, semantic approaches are very important there. So that's why we decided to also in earlier stages, if you joined Connect or TXS in previous year, you've seen this slide before. We've announced a strategic partnership with Semantic Web Company, and they're basically the owner and builder of PooParty, which is the taxonomy management tool, and much more around that, right? So we're building Tridion features based on their capabilities, and that's basically powering up our AI capabilities that we're going to talk about today. So I don't want to necessarily go into the details of what PooParty is, but I do want to make you aware of that we have a platform powering all of these capabilities. So I mean, just broadly, there's a couple of areas, a couple of themes, so you will that we could go into, and there's a certain idea of things that we can build here around that based on these semantic technology capabilities, and there's things like measuring outcomes, so really trying to get more insights into how content is performing. Are you getting the return on the investment that you're actually predicting, or that's been projected for you? I mean, for instance, when implementing Tridion Docs, do you actually get the return on that investment with less user hours basically put into getting better output getting better output of structuring your content and all that kind of stuff. Is that something that the product actually is working for you, right? So those kind of things are things that you want to know about. If you look at Tridion Sites, specific or related things here, examples here, you could imagine like, hey, is my content actually being viewed? So hooking it up with analytics. But then if it is viewed, or if it's not viewed, why not? Is there maybe poor SEO? Is there all kinds of other things that maybe is my content not accessible, or anything else? Actually, that could be a problem there. All that kind of stuff is kind of related to insights and measuring outcomes. On the other side, we have compliance and accuracy. So you should imagine here customers who are working a lot with rules and regulations, or medical information, content like that. You can imagine that definitely there it's important to make sure that if you update a certain piece of content, that you actually are sure that all the related pieces of content are linked in a certain way and not forgotten to be updated if that's necessary, because you don't want to make any mistakes with those kind of bits of information, because that can be very expensive, and in some cases, if you're talking about rules and regulations for medicine or other life-threatening things, then that's could be more than just money that we're talking about. And in general, future-proofing content and data. So basically, if you have your data all tagged semantically, you're basically setting yourself up for a future-proof setup with where all kinds of new functionality in the future can be built on top of. excuse me. If you look at authoring and editor productivity, some things you will see today as well. I mean, you can imagine here quickly being able to figure out if you're creating duplicate content, or things that are easily relatable, or at least things that are being linked together in a semantically way. You can figure out like, okay, I'm updating this piece of content. Maybe there's other parts of my content that are related that I need to have a quick look at as well. Quickly being able to find that. Things like smart tagging will come up in a minute as well. So I won't spoil all of it right away. But that's stuff where productivity on the editor and author side actually plays a role. But also findability of the content itself, obviously. So this is something that you can imagine is important on the authoring side, as well as even more important, maybe even on the consumer side, right? So making sure that end users are able to find the content that they're looking for. And I think this is basically relating back to that first example of China Airlines, right? So making sure that those user journeys are connected, that you can actually find related pieces of content more easily. But also, well, it's a fact basically that you get better, totally lost the word, conversions. There we go. Better conversions when actually users are able to spend more time on your site and actually find the things that they were looking for, and in such a way actually in the end basically either booking services with you, buying products from you, or anything basically that will help them make decisions and answer their questions that they have. So if you look at all of these different themes, the near-term pieces are actually focusing on those three here. So content findability, the author and editor productivity, and the future-proofing. Very specifically, what does the Semantic AI offering consist of? Well, these are its features and capabilities. So we're talking about smart tagging. This is what Ben was quickly touching upon already earlier, and we'll have a quick look at some demonstrations of all of these pieces. But smart tagging is basically writing content, submitting that content for analysis, and then getting suggestions on what concepts actually fit best with my content, right? So not just by looking at exactly pieces of keywords that are matching. Obviously, if they're there, great. But we're really through NLP, we're analyzing that content. We're trying to understand that content and finding concepts that can match there. So this is semi-automated in a way, right? You're basically requesting for tags, and you get those tag suggestions, and you can still manually update if you want. You can also do this in a batch fashion. So that means that you can just submit multiple pieces of content for tagging, and then they automatically get updated. And you can afterwards actually open them up and update still, of course, manually or check. But at least that's a way of going about a repository with content that's already there, which still needs to be semantically enriched, obviously. Well, where do we get all those tags from? Well, that's from taxonomy space, because that's the place where we, as a knowledge manager, like Ben was already showing in his graph, in his diagram, as a knowledge manager, you're actually managing the taxonomy in taxonomy space, and you're building up that model of those concepts, how they're related to each other, the different labels in the different languages, and so on, right? So all of those different aspects of managing the taxonomy, that's done in taxonomy space. But using it that's totally something you can do from Tridion. So after your content has been tagged appropriately and it's been published, well, then that basically opens up possibilities for the semantic search capabilities, right? So here we have the two aspects of faceted search. So you're using your concept and your hierarchy of the concept to actually find content or actually narrow down on your content search results. Right, so based on different properties, you can say like, okay, I'm looking for a specific type of car. Well, what car am I looking for? Well, it's a red car. It's actually 4 doors, and it's from a certain, I don't know, a certain year, for instance. You can imagine those kind of applications there. The other bit of the semantic search capability here is about when you start typing for a search query, you start typing in a search query. This example here on the page will show you how different concepts might actually match with what you're typing at the moment, right? So it's actually suggesting some search keywords, search concepts that you can autocomplete and start using. I'm sorry. If you have any questions, please just type them in the chat, and I'll try to address them. So that's something that from both the authoring experience as well as on the end user experience. Actually, we're releasing in the upcoming Tridion Sites and Tridion Docs products. So let me see. I have a couple of questions here in the chat. So do we have recommendations yet for how much content we need for a good example or demo? All right. Okay. So Philippe is already mentioning here that it's accurate also on small content sets, right? So you get good results back on small sets of content on the suggestions from the NLP analysis. And this will not work with smart tagging in the classic UI. So this is experience-based only. And we'll show a little demo of that actually in a minute. Let me quickly talk a little bit more about, well, what is the offering exactly, right? So how do we package this? So we have our Semantic AI package that is a SaaS offering, right? So we have a SaaS only product here or add-on, if you will, that does work with on-premise as well as our cloud hosted Tridion products as of, well, the upcoming versions of those, right? It does include all those features I just mentioned. So smart tagging, the semantic search, taxonomy space, and it's basically the way forward of doing taxonomy in both Tridion Sites and Docs. So this does have to come with some professional services hours just to get the customer set up. It's basically setting it up, but also there's probably some hours in there to guide customers into a certain direction as well, because this is obviously something that not every customer is already completely knowledgeable into, right? So I mean, we have a lot of conversations already with customers that are very interested in this, but those obviously are the ones that are also already value the the capabilities. They know what all of this semantic technology is capable of, and they do understand all of that. And that's those kind of customers are great, of course, but we do want to make this available to the broad set of customers that we have, right? So not just only the ones that actually are completely into this technology already. We do want to make sure that everyone is able to get this set up, and that's why we include some service hours into it as well. And full support is done by us. Yeah. Okay, so then just for your information, that's what we sell as the add-on for the product, right? For Tridion. There are customers, however, who have a completely broader strategy around semantic technology. Typically, those customers I just mentioned that are completely already aware of what this is capable of, and they want to go further and connect it up to way more systems than just Tridion. Well, in those cases, we are able to also resell the licenses for those customers. But then, yeah, it's basically up to them to figure out how they want it to set up, either by them on-prem or SWC. There's definitely capabilities of exchanging the data and keeping that up to date with the Tridion Semantic AI package, right? Which is a mandatory piece for getting these different capabilities in Tridion that we just talked about. So the features like smart tagging and semantic search and taxonomy space itself. But you don't want to maintain different versions of your taxonomies across the enterprise. That kind of defies the purpose. So that's why these systems can talk to each other. Yeah, and here there's different ways of configuration and setup. So there's a lot of guidance there that will depend on semantic web company for that. But it does make sense to also use some consulting from them or their approved partners, such as Enterprise Knowledge, for instance. You see, there's another question from Terry about semantic AI can be used for ECL asset metadata. Yeah, so Nick, thanks for answering. This is already, so there. So it can be used indeed for the stubs metadata. We don't update the external metadata in the ECL item itself. Right, so we're not going back to the source system basically to update any content. Sorry, metadata there. All right, so and then I have, I think, a last slide before we hand it over, just on some quick guidelines. So on the Tridion Semantic AI package and the offering, basically we're saying, well, we have a one-size-fits-all thing because we know it works well in this way for Tridion, but we recommend setting up, the taxonomy to a maximum of 1,000 concepts per project. That's for performance and such reasons, right? So we just we've done extensive testing, and we know for sure that we can guarantee performance and SLAs with that amount of concepts. If you go bigger, then yeah, there's lots of things we need to discuss about, I think. But I'm also very curious to see, basically usable taxonomies with more concepts there, other than just a flat list of labels. All right, so and on the multilingual support, and I think this is mostly important for those APAC attendees. I mean, we do have multilingual support, so it is truly multilingual in that we don't really tie the concepts to a source language, right? So it can be any source language that you can use here. Doesn't need to be English. All languages are treated equally, but there's some caveats that smart tagging itself is not explicitly supported for East Asian languages, and that's where because of the way that we're used to dividing words and such, and compose a phrase in Western languages with spaces, and there's no white space limiting of words per se in those East Asian languages. So that's a little bit tricky there. So smart tagging there is not really supported. Manual tagging obviously will work with those East Asian languages, and other source languages will actually work fine. So just some additional things there. So concepts will actually work well, right? So if you have concepts with labels that are translated to East Asian language in taxonomy space, no problem, that will work as expected. You can also use them in Tridion. So the manual tagging works well, just smart tagging. Don't expect great results from that with East Asian languages though. For content in East Asian languages are supported, and also the search suggestions, like I said, so matching them to the concepts with labels in East Asian languages are supported too. Okay, so let's see. I saw a couple of questions coming in, so let's see if I can answer those before heading over. Is it correct understanding that smart tagging suggestions only take into account whatever is in taxonomy space? The suggestion does not include 3D managed metadata. It is the use of any ECL external metadata. Let me see if I understand this correctly. So the smart tagging suggestions the suggestions will be done based on the analysis of the content that you sent for analysis, right? And the content that we're talking about in Tridion Sites, for instance, is about components. It doesn't include 3D managed metadata, categories, and keywords. No, so it doesn't work with categories and keywords. So in the internal taxonomy that you're used to in Tridion Sites, it will only work against indeed the taxonomy that's managed in taxonomy space. That's correct. And you can still use you can still use them, obviously, right? So categories and keywords can still be used, but they will not be suggested to you like the ones from taxonomy space will. Indeed, that's correct, RG. Let me see. If concepts are not tied to any source language, does that mean that one concept translated 4 times is 4 concepts? No. So a concept is a concept, right? So that's why it's called a concept. That's always the same thing, but it has different labels in different languages. That is basically, those are just attributes to that concept. And I think this is something that Ivo will probably be able to show you a little bit more about as well later on in this session, how that works exactly. But indeed, the concept itself, that's the understanding of us talking a certain language, and the machine, interpreting as a certain thing as well. Okay, so Philippe, are you still on the call?
Yes.
Great. So I'm turning to you for a neat demo. Philippe has done a couple of recordings before already for I think Connect and other events, but yeah, can you show a couple of the things that we talked about today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Arno.
Thanks.
Hey everybody, can you see my screen? Good. All right, so yeah, to illustrate some of the points from my colleagues, I'll go into a quick demonstration of some of the features. So there are a few aspects, it's quite a broad solution coming together, right? So we'll start with the front-end experience, like an example experience that you could create using the new semantic search APIs. We'll look into the smart tagging feature, both in Sites and Docs, actually. And then we'll look at GraphQL Api as well. And then Ivo will dive into the taxonomy space, so how you organize your taxonomy and put it together in the first place. Which you could start with that in an implementation, but here we'll kind of go backwards and look at the end result first. So here I have a sample website about an insurance company providing different types of products for home insurance, car insurance, business insurance, and so on. So you can think of any type of insurance provider typically has many products, lots of content. which I don't have in this demo, but it's quite a small content set. But still, you get relevant result even with those smaller content sets. But obviously, it's very relevant when you have more content to work with, and when your customers or consumers are spending time in their journey trying to find the content that they want. So instead of browsing through all the pages and so forth, they might go and start typing a search term. But depending on the search you're providing today or your customers are providing to their customers, this journey might be satisfying or not. So we're trying to help there with the suggestions. So as you type, you can see that we provide suggestions, and these are concepts coming from the knowledge graph that relate to the search term you're typing. So it's, again, going beyond synonyms and really finding the meaning of the word you're using and the related terms to call that concept or that object or that idea. And once this is related to your business or to your customer's business, so for the insurance company, defining the knowledge graph, defining their business context and all the terms that define their business and all their products and how they relate to each other is what will help to improve the search experience and make it much quicker for the users to find their content. So here when I'm typing car, for example, or if I'm typing vehicle, I'm going to find different concepts that relate to those terms. So I don't have to type auto specifically, although auto is the actual concept that we have in the knowledge graph. Through the related labels and the relationships between the concepts, we actually propose, relevant suggestions, if you will. Then if I pick one of these, in some search results experiences, you don't have facets, right? So you might have a list of thousands of results to browse through and pagination and so forth. So depending, if your result is down in the 10th page or something like that, as a user, it's not very user-friendly to drill down all that content to find what you're looking for. So you might, start typing different keywords and still not finding what you're looking for, which can be a bit painful. So here, with the concept of facets and adding those dynamic dimensions or filters to refine the search experience, then it makes it quicker to find the content you're looking for. So if I wanted to, get information about purchasing a car insurance or getting a quote or something like that, I can just select one of these facets to narrow down the search results and get information about the actual car insurance. So I get to the detail page and quickly take action and ask for an insurance quote based on my zip code or whatever. And then also based on the classification of content, which is going to be more accurate than traditional tagging, we'll be able to provide related content that makes sense as part of the customer journey. So this is a very quick example. But it also actually applies to docs content or employee-facing content. So we can look at an example there as well. If I go into login, so as an employee, for example, I'm an insurance agent working for that Acadian insurance company. Log in here. We can provide the same search experience. So we have the same web application logic, if you will, using the same API and so forth. Here we're providing some docs publications that the user can browse or the employee, but maybe they're going to search for different terms as well because they want to help their customers if they have a support ticket or they have a call and they want to find the relevant information for that customer call. They might be looking into some docs policies, procedures, FAQs, things like that. And again, use the semantic search to start to find the right concepts that apply to what they're looking for. So you can search for, bodily injury here, and then start to discover content as well based on the dynamic facets because they're relevant and have those relationships. You can see that the user may realize, I'm actually looking for liability insurance. That's what I was looking for. So you can help them to steer the journey by using these filters and then end up in the right documentation that they were looking for example, and get to the topic that makes sense to find the information they were looking for as quickly as possible. So that's sort of the concept of using semantic search and semantic tagging to make the journey faster, not so that your customers go away faster, but so that your customer are satisfied because they find content that we're looking for faster. So that's really the concept here, and it applies to, again, docs and sites content, same set of APIs there. The way you put that together, if we look at how the content is tagged, let me go into Tridion Sites first. We can select multiple items here, and we can auto-classify them. So you have this new option there to auto-classify. So that's the bulk tagging. You can let that run. It takes a couple of seconds, and then it will apply into the metadata the right tags. You can refine those. You can change those, obviously, by modifying the component content, or you can apply those manually as well if you prefer. I'm going to show you an example of that. But basically, these are traditional metadata fields, except they're tied to a taxonomy space keyword, and I'll show you as well that you can actually browse your content using the pool party keywords. So I can go into some of the keywords here and navigate through my content or find the content that was tagged with some of these keywords. So these are Tridion components that were tagged with those external taxonomy items here. And I can, of course, verify that by looking at the content. I see roadside assistance on both ends, obviously. That's why I'm finding this content here. So let's look at one of those. I can retag something. So I'll open one component here. It's about the car insurance product, and it has some information about this product here. Maybe it says accident here and some nice keywords. So sometimes you have the exact match in your knowledge graph for a particular word that was added to your article or written by your marketers. Sometimes you don't, but then through the knowledge graph definition, if it's rich enough, it's nicely defined, you will find those related concepts that match and make sense to apply to the content. So here I already have tagged this one, so I can remove some tags. And you can choose actually define some specific fields. With this little icon, it means they are smart taggable, so you can use the suggest tags option to get a recommendation from AI and natural language processing. And some fields may be defined as manual fields, if you will. So you can still browse the external taxonomy repository and drill down to these. And you can also type to filter out the results to what you're looking for and apply different tags this way pretty quickly, which I like. And yeah, so let's go ahead and tag one of these components with AI. So if I hit the suggest tags button, it will then analyze the content, match it against the knowledge graph concepts that are there, and give me those suggestions. So you have the indication on each field that was updated, so you know what's updated, and then you can refine those suggestions if you want. So if you're happy, you can a bit like this, or you can, if you want to be extremely precise, I'm thinking of maybe customers with more regulated content and things like that, that needs to be extremely accurate for legal reasons and so forth. You want maybe to have the exact right tagging specification, and there you can refine some of these. You also want to avoid having maybe too many tags on each content piece, otherwise they will show up in all kinds of search results context. So you want to be a little bit accurate there. And that's it. Then you're done tagging your content in sites at least. So I'll revert this because I want to keep my initial tagging. So that's for sites. Then for docs, you have multiple ways to use the smart tagging as well. You have it in draft space. So when you're editing a publication and concepts, let's say I'm going for a search here. I pick a topic and then I can go into the properties here to get the suggest tags button. If you show the optional fields, you can see all the tags that were added to this particular item. So it's very similar to sites. You have some fields, metadata fields that are smart taggable or can be automated, and some of them are just a manual selection of the content. So I can say, okay, USA, and tag this with USA, for example, in the location field, or I can look for a particular goal, maybe, and narrow it down also to what I'm looking for. So very easy to use in terms of manual tagging, but also obviously smart tagging. If you're more lazy, just click the button and you get those tags. Same thing, you can refine them here just as well, and you see which fields have been updated. So that's quite nice to use, and definitely accurate. I mean, even on a small topic like that, I mean, it's very accurate, the terms that are recommended. Now you can also go and use Publication Manager. So sorry for the sites purists. Won't spend too much time on this, but you have bulk tagging also here, so I can apply some tags, and it will start an asynchronous process to tag a few items using the managed graph. And otherwise, you can go into the properties of a particular topic, and you have this new taxonomy tab, sorry, where you can then again browse the knowledge graph and find the different concepts that you want to apply to your content. And obviously, you have the suggest tags button to also make that quicker and automated. You can also use that. So I'm going to resize this. There we go. You can also use your preferred XML editor, like Oxygen or Xmetal, with the Tridion Docs plugin here. I already opened a particular topic from a different publication here in this case, and similarly, I have the same options and can get suggestions about this particular content. So very nice and easy to use in all the different interfaces to tag your content. What I wanted to show as well is a very brief demo of the GraphQL API. So what we've seen, we've seen a website where I had a search bar experience, and we were showing some suggestions, as well as the facets to filter down the search results and display the search results as well. So we have new APIs in our GraphQL Content API with a couple of methods. We have the suggest option, so you pass your search term, and you will get those suggestions here, with also the alternative labels. So that's how we can find beyond synonyms related concepts as well that you want to display, maybe as a drop down like we've done in our demonstration. And we have the actual search query with multiple facets potentially that were applied if you want to narrow down the search results. And you also get in the results the facets that you have to display. So all the different facets information are there. And you can even use strongly typed models in the broker part of the results to get a particular field from your content if you want to display specific information within the search results. It's all self-documented because it's the beauty of GraphQL. So that's quite nice to work with it also. And let me see if I forgot something. I think those were the main things. So obviously you need to organize your taxonomies in taxonomy space first before being able to use the smart tagging feature. Once you're tagged content, you can publish that content, or you have to publish that content so that it goes into the DXD. It updates Elasticsearch through our new deployer, not extensions, but deployer capabilities to push that content to Elasticsearch with all the knowledge graph information and all the search results information, so that you can then use the GraphQL API to use that in any app, mobile app, voice assistant, or any other technology that you want to use to implement that at a customer. So I think that's all I had for today. Thanks for listening, and I'll pass it over to is it Ben or Ivo?
Ivo, thank you, Philippe.
Thanks.
Take up the presentation for the taxonomy space. What was Philippe mentioning? So in taxonomy space, you're actually going to manage your whole taxonomy with a nice UI. A bit of a taxonomy space, so it's basically for managing your thesaurus, and you can actually do that by importing a public one. There are a couple of public ones available on the internet, or you can also create your own one. It depends on how you want to start. There's content schemes that are basically acting as a facet for faceted search. That was actually presented in the Philippe's demo. So those are basically the starting point of your thesaurus, creating the concept scheme. And the concepts have basically a unique identifier, and that unique identifier actually, it is created for you, and it will always basically remain the same. And with that identifier, you can actually classify your content across repositories. So it's not only indeed for one repository for Tridion Sites, but indeed you can also use for Tridion Docs as well. This uniquely identifier, so you can also then link content between the sites and docs as well with this. There's also support for multilingual as well, so the preferred label of a concept is also multilingual, and it also has the notion of alternative labels as well. And also, when you actually finish your taxonomy and you update it, you have to somehow refresh the extraction model, and that extraction model is a kind of model that the extraction service uses to finding the right concept in your text. So that's very important. If you adopt it or change your taxonomy, you have to refresh your extraction model. Besides that, there's also something like a corpus management. So you created your taxonomy already, or you imported one, a public one, or you created it from scratch. There also is an option that to verify it as well.
Je hebt gebeld.
Oh, sorry, Arno, you're not muted.
Ben je er nu pas?
Sorry.
Wacht even.
Yeah, I muted Arno. So for the corpus management, basically you can have your taxonomy created. You can upload a couple of documents, and then you can press the button. Then it actually uses your taxonomy to find the right concept in your from your documents, and based on that one, you can actually see the score, but also maybe some new terms as well, and maybe you can use those terms. It will also find some terms, and if it's really important those terms for you, you can validate it, and then you can actually from the term you actually can create your concept and then put it in your taxonomy, and in that way you can also update your taxonomy as well. And then I give a small demo of it, if time permits. So this is basically taxonomy space. It's a pool party, and I want to create a new project. And within the project, I actually import an existing taxonomy that we actually use for testing. I will call it Bootcamp. Then we go to next, and here are actually the available languages. You can do it right away, but later on you can also add more languages, and those languages actually use also creating those labels as well. Next, and then you actually the user group. So users that are, you can create users in taxonomy space themselves, and you can assign users to groups, and with those groups you can access to the taxonomy. And there's also the advanced section as well. Here you actually basically have the Uri generator. That basically for each project, this Uri generator is unique, and that is also you have to be aware of that one as well. So you can actually create something like Tridion.com, and then it will actually, with the project identified bootcamp, it will generate those identifiers for those concepts based on those URI settings. You can change it. It's not required, but you can change it. And then you create your project, and with the project, it shows a new pop-up. You can actually select your taxonomy and use the import. During the import, taxonomy space will actually validate it. There's some kind of validator running. So if the format is correct, for example, and also if your scores RDF format is really correct. If that is not the case, then it will actually list it for you. And sometimes it also come up with suggestions as well how to fix those. And when everything is okay, green, you can actually save it, and then it is basically saved for you. And then you can probably access it as well. And then it will actually import it correctly. It saved it, and now it will try to open it. Takes a while. And here you can actually see the taxonomy. So basically what we have, for example, we have here the content type that also Philippe was using in his demo. This is basically the concept scheme. And this basically links to your field in Tridion. It does not matter if it's Tridion Sites and Tridion Docs. And here you have, zoom it in. And here you have the identifier, this one. And this is actually the one you're actually using for configuration as well. And based on those concept schemes, you can actually create concepts, and we call them, the first level is basically a top concept. And those have identifiers as well. And these are actually the ones we store in our system. So we never store the labels. We only store these identifiers in our systems. And if you are here, you can also probably, this was the concept. So in this one, for example, you can create another label, something like audio, can create a concept. And based on this concept, if it's not detailed enough, you can also make a narrow term as well. So for audio, maybe you want to do something like for a podcast, I don't know what, but in that way you can actually update your taxonomy, enlarge it, make it better with narrow or broader terms, and you can also move it around. And here you actually see this explanation mark, and this is actually saying your extraction model is not up to date. And then normally if you can go to the corpora, and here's the refresh extraction model, and that will actually update the extraction model. So if you're extracting a concept from your content, it will use the right taxonomy with all your updated labels as well. That also takes a while indeed to do it, so that is probably done. So I will close this one, and I will open another one that is a bit more prepared with some kind of a corpus analysis. So I have this one. So this one, you have an extra tab basically for your taxonomy, and there's the corpus. In this corpus, you can actually upload your documents, and it will come up with, based on your documents, it will extract all the concepts from it basically. And here you get an overview how frequently it is used in your documentation. So that gives you some guidance, hopefully, to create a good taxonomy for yourself. It's extracting concepts, but they're also extracted terms. So the terms are not really concepts well, but they are maybe candidates indeed for making concepts. So you can actually search on it, and then, for example, you can see it, then you can select it, and they can actually make a candidate concept for this one. And if it's a candidate concept, it will end up in this list. And in this list, probably you can open your whole taxonomy for this one. And then probably you can also, if this one open, you can actually drag it under a broader term. And then you can actually say integrate it, then it will integrate it as well, this one. One thing I forgot to mention about the other taxonomy. Here you basically have your preferred label. And this one you can also change it, but you also have like you have to go to the taxonomy, the right. So if you want to add labels, you have to go to basically this one to the management, and in Corpus Management you cannot change the labels. And here you can actually change the label, but also if you have like another language, you can add the language or the label in other language. And the same is for alternative labels. Alternative labels, it's more almost like the preferred label, But also if it finds a match during the extraction, it will also give you the suggestion for this concept as well. And of course, if you make some changes to the whole taxonomy, then you need something like a change management. And then I will hand over to Nick to explain this.
Okay, sure. Arno, can you share the live presentation again, or shall I share again?
Yeah, I can definitely share. No worries.
Cool.
Give me a sec. And, oh, you're already taking over.
Okay. Okay, let me just find the right slide. Okay, here we go. So to add a bit more around the taxonomy space and change management and workflows, to add some additional governance, there are some few best practices how to enable workflows. And the recommendation we got from SWC is that we have a master publication where you do your audio editing, where you have workflows enabled, those kind of things. When you're done, then you export it to like a read-only replica, which you connect to the Tridion Sites, Tridion Docs, CM, and DXT indexing. And that's doing that, then you don't end up in issues where, for example, draft concepts are leaking out to the website, for example. So that is done by export import in the taxonomy space, and it can also be scripted as well, if you see that is more convenient. So that is quickly on change management in taxonomy space. And then regarding the Taxonomy Connector, that comes in two different flavors. On the doc side, we have what we call the taxonomy metadata binding handler, that using the existing metadata handler integration point that talks to the taxonomy space. On Tridion Sites, we have another variant of the connector using Tridion integration framework that we use both on the Tridion Site side and on the DXT side. It's exactly the same connector, just deployed on different systems. And on Tridion Sites, we just upload a connector to add-on service, while during deployment for docs, then this connector is installed as an extension directly on the DXT system. And I'm going to cover this in more detail in the breakout session on Tridion Sites. I think I covered most of the things regarding connector on a high level. Any questions on connectors in general? Cool.
Okay, thanks, Nick. So I want to just cover some of the details of what happens when we get into the dynamic experience delivery platform part. So Philippe's already shown how users consume this from a web application, how you would build out a web application based on these features. So we are providing interactive faceted search here. So it does allow you to do that kind of successive further facets filtering on your document set. So each time you add a new facet to that filter, you get to see the results from that set, which you can then return to your users. This is provided again through that GraphQL endpoint, and you'll see more examples of that in the breakout sessions afterwards. And as I mentioned earlier, this is all running underneath on a new Elasticsearch index. So we already had an index sitting in there supporting our existing search implementation. We've added a new one to support the taxonomy index, or cache if you like. It's essentially a copy of that knowledge space, taxonomy space, taxonomy hierarchy, in order for optimal performance, because obviously you don't want to be searching direct against that extra system. And you've already seen an example of the navigation suggestions from Philippe earlier. So just briefly touching on some of the technicalities of what goes on under the hood when we publish to DXD, and in particular the deployer. So Nick already mentioned we have this taxonomy connector. So actually there's two pieces working in the deployer. There's the taxonomy connector itself, which is the piece that talks to taxonomy space, and there's also a taxonomy extension, which is the bit that sits on the deployer that uses that connector framework and that connector. This is the bit that tells the deployer this deployer has this specific capability. So for customers that aren't licensed to use the taxonomy space, there's no need to install that connector, and you don't have the overhead of all the piece that goes underneath that. So basically there's multiple things that the deployer will do as you publish content, either from Docs or Sites. So we always receive a deployer package or a transport package from Sites into the deployer. And the first thing it will do, obviously, is if it's a pure publishing operation, we will just store that content in the broker as we've done before. If you're search enabled and you're licensed for search, you will also store just a search index within Elasticsearch, within that search index. So again, this is just a copy of the content sitting in Elasticsearch to provide for fast search retrieval. And then the third piece that happens that the deployer is responsible for is keeping this concept index, which you see at the top of this diagram, up to date. So the concept index, consider it as a sort of cache. We refresh it at various points during publishing and keep it up to date if there are changes going in there. And the way that we actually do that refresh, it's triggered in various ways that we'll discuss in a minute. But once it is triggered, what it does under the hood is actually do an additional step. It creates what we call a concept filter, which is, for anyone familiar with Elasticsearch, it's a way of marking up your content or your search index and apply a filter onto that content that can be used in your query time search against that index. So what we do in that index is we essentially expand out your taxonomy hierarchy. So let's say the example that Ivo was showing you in there, if you had that podcast concept, we would expand within the concept filter, the podcast, and then all of its parent terms, all the broader terms, right up to the root top concept in that concept scheme. So we essentially flatten out each concept with this idea of a concept filter. That's stored as an inline filter within our search index. But the way that Elasticsearch is, when you change a search index within Elastic, you have to re-index your content, because obviously we're doing index time expansion of these concepts, not query time, because it's faster to do it that way. So the way we've implemented that is using this idea of a blue-green search mechanism on that index. So when we receive the synchronized message, what we do is we build out that new concept filter, and we will then resync and re-index that search index whilst keeping one of those indexes live. So what that allows us to do is the content service then always have access to a current copy of the search index. The re-indexing process may take a couple of minutes on a large Elasticsearch index, so you need to have an index live during that time. And we have a locking mechanism as well to make sure that multiple synchronization events don't all try and re-index at the same time. So at the end of the day, we're left with these two indexes, the search index and the concept index. That search index has this concept filter already applied in there, and that's the piece that allows you to do these quite rich faceted search queries against that index, which you've seen already in the demo. And we'll talk more about that in the upcoming site session as well for those that are interested. So just recapping again, the taxonomy add-on, it extends the deploy capabilities that we have. It's using that shared taxonomy connector that Nick talked about. You only need to configure it once for this side of the configuration. For Sites and DXD, they share the same configuration. For Docs, there's the XML configuration you will also have to do, which looks pretty similar, and you can see that in the session tomorrow about how that's set up. The actual connector itself has an optimized memory footprint, so each concept scheme or facet has its own little namespace, if you like, that's managing all the concepts within it, and that's optimized in a way. The actual connector, for those that are interested, runs as a .NET process within our deployer. So this is harnessing the power of our Tridion integration framework and the connector manager that allows you to run extensions in either Java or .NET within that connector manager. So that's why we can use it on both sites, CM, which is .NET, and DXD, which is Java. And as we said, it requires a connection to taxonomy space. So that is as Arno mentioned earlier, it's generally regarded to be a hosted solution. So you do need network access for those customers that need to use this. And then we talked briefly about the way the synchronization works. So as I mentioned earlier, the sync, it's decoupled from taxonomy space itself. So it is a copy of it. We maintain all the labels and relations and parent and child relationships within that Elasticsearch index. So we can traverse it and manipulate it and query it in whatever way we wish. I talked about when it gets updated. So when you first publish some content that has some concepts tagged against it, if that concept does not exist in the concept index, we trigger that update process. So at that point, we go back to taxonomy space, ask it for all the concepts within that facet, and then we sync that cached entry within that index. On the site side, you can force a full resynchronization by publishing a category. And on the doc side, there's a special publication you can send that Evo can show you tomorrow that will do the same thing. Normally that's not used, but sometimes if, for instance, you've changed the layout of your taxonomy or perhaps moved some of the concept relationships around, you might want to force a resync so everything's up to date in that. So you can force that resync at that point. If you're just changing labels, you don't need to republish your content. So this is one of the benefits of the decoupled data model that we have. We mentioned earlier that we're only talking about concept ID references. So Evo showed you that. So we're only maintaining references to these IDs within the search index. So it means that if you add translations, all you need to do is resync the concept index, and the rest of it doesn't need to be reindexed because none of those labels are actually even stored in there. And I talked already about how that blue-green index gets rebuilt without downtime. It's worth just mentioning briefly that obviously if you have a large index, you need to have capacity in your Elasticsearch cluster to have both indexes in that cluster at the same time. I mean, it obviously doesn't keep it maintained. We don't always keep a copy. We create a new index and then kill the old one once it's been re-indexed. And then from the APIs, so Philippe's already showed you some nice examples of these. So we have this new faceted search root query. We still, for those familiar with the old 9.5 search query, they're still there. So we've kept them for backwards compatibility, but we would recommend customers switch to this new facet enabled search query, which is a bit more rich and provides support for facet configuration and facet summaries, which you can see in this small example here. And we've also added this new taxonomy query, which is the one that you can use to retrieve the hierarchy from our concept index, and you can drill down into that recursively. And again, that is querying that separate index and is not going back direct to taxonomy space. And then finally is the suggest query that Philippe showed you. So this is how you can do the sort of type ahead of concept-based suggestions based on label names. It will go into those alternate names as well. It'll work with multi-language. And if you pass in this used flag that you can see here, it will only show results where those concepts are actually used in your document set. So you don't end up showing unused concepts in those type heads. That's it for this first session. So do we have any questions? Let's see. Can we schedule a concept index? I'm assuming you mean, can we schedule what the reindex process do you mean? Because if so, you can, as I say, you can either let the system automatically do it for you. We do have a script, a PowerShell script and a bash script if you wish to use it to force a reindex. So there may be customers that don't want to wait for that reindex process, particularly if you've got a large data set that may wish to just automatically reindex it on a schedule indeed. So you could use those scripts to do that, yes. but we have tested it on reasonably large data sets, and it is pretty quick. So is the old taxonomy API, if you're talking about DXD side, then yes, we still have the existing site-specific taxonomy APIs in the GraphQL endpoint, and you can still obviously get categories and keywords out in that form. So if you're still using the old taxonomies from sites, that will still work. Obviously, they don't map onto the search functionality that we've exposed. So you can't do faceted search based on a old style Tridion taxonomy at this stage. Any other questions? No, I'm going to hand back to Arno then.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. Well, and Ivo and Niclas and Philippe as well, of course. I think it's time to jump into the breakout session. So I'll stop the recording for this one. And then we'll see you guys in the specific Tridion Sites and Tridion Docs breakout sessions that you got an invite for. So